Thanks again, everybody, for jumping on for our second keynote speaker for the day. Hope this setup, the format that we're using, is working out well for everybody. Again, it's a little unorthodox, but we're very grateful to be able to have these digital options to do things like this. Before Pat begins, just same thing here. If anybody has any questions throughout the presentation, please put those into the chat box or into the Q&A section, and we will be sure to address any questions at the end of the presentation. And then after Pat goes, then again we'll have about a 10-minute break, and then we'll have our second technical workshop, and then followed by our third and final keynote speaker for the afternoon. So without further ado, Pat, take it away.
Thanks, Zach. Hey, everybody. So my name is Pat Healy. I own the Maine Athletic Health Center. My office was originally Healy Chiropractic, but we've since added a lot of different services, and we felt that Maine Athletic Health Center kind of represented what we do a little bit more. So this presentation is about creating value through simplicity and reproducibility. And simplicity is kind of a word that I guess I maybe misused it in this situation. But what we have to do as providers is simplify very complex data so that patients can understand it and make it useful. So one of the things that we prioritize in our office is patient communication and how the patients are able to use what we provide to them. So this is me. I'm a chiropractor. I have a master's degree in sports rehabilitation. I'm the team chiropractor for the University of Maine, and I work. Our office does the sports medicine and athletic training with the local high school in our town. I had a lot of unique opportunities in my 10-year career, and kind of tell you our path through Noraxon and how we've developed over the last 3 years that we've been using it and how we use it. So our office, chiropractors, we got a physical therapist starting November 2nd, certified athletic trainers, we've had licensed massage therapists. The PT is a certified strength and conditioning coach. We do CPR, AED, and first aid instruction, and we collaborative practice. We work very closely with other physical therapists, chiropractors, and medical providers, orthopedists in our area, and that's our testing. Our motion analysis is used in a lot of different ways. This is our facility. I'm sitting here in the lab right now, and this is on the second floor of an old barn that we renovated, and this bottom floor is our rehab space where the physical therapist will call home in a couple weeks. So I guess the goals of today's presentation for me are to kind of communicate to you where we started and how we ended up using this type of technology, and discuss kind of the struggles with clinical application of motion analysis, learn how we tackled those problems and the problems of data presentation, discuss our process and how we approach motion analysis as a practice, look at some research that's out there, and maybe how reliability provider to provider is validated, and what we can do to improve that reliability as Noraxon users. And I know the last presentation, Corey was talking a lot about collaboration, and I think that's very important in developing some norms with motion analysis that we can agree upon. So we actually started with Noraxon in 2017. We were trying to find something different than an iPhone to measure movement. And, the iPhone can slow stuff down. All right, you can see stuff, but it wasn't enough for us. So we ended up getting the 7 IMU, 5 EMG, and 2 camera system, and we've since upgraded to 9 IMUs. We realized that we were completely lost when we got started, and that we had probably no business being there, but we just kept forging ahead. And we spent a lot of time on the phone with Noraxon support. They are it's a great organization, very helpful, very willing to communicate if you have problems. So don't ever hesitate to call them. But then this meeting that you're sitting in right now, it was in Phoenix, Arizona, the year that I went, or Scottsdale at Exos, and it was a life-changing experience for me. This was our lab when we started. It was a 12 by 12 room. We had a treadmill and TV, and off we went. This is where we are now. This is what we use and where we do our testing. That batting cage does drop down from the ceiling, so we can hit a driver up here if we need to, or we can evaluate a baseball swing or a football quarterback throwing a ball or field hockey player hitting a ball. I mean, whatever needs to be done, we can do it. And I think that's kind of one of the things that we value, is that we can adapt to the patients. Kevin Vandy at that after that user meeting made a comment that we were biomechanics in a barn, and he was not wrong at all. But this was our athletic trainer actually painting the wall that you see behind me. So this was the user meeting. My mind was blown. We don't have anything like this in Brewer, Maine, so this is pretty cool for me to go and experience something like this. And it really opened my eyes to the power of what we had. You know, so many different professionals from so many different backgrounds, all speaking the same language and communicating about the information, and all kind of agreeing that, hey, this is a very powerful tool that we have. But one commonality remained, that we didn't communicate with each other very well about how we do things. We all kind of had our own little niches of, we're good at this, or we look at this. And so I kind of set off after that meeting to try to do some things so that my office could be consistent with the way we present information. But it was so awesome. The continental breakfast at the hotel the morning of that meeting was life-changing to me, because I was sitting there at this table, had a Noraxon folder sitting next to me, and all of a sudden, one person sat down next to me and we started talking. And then before I know it, there's 10 or 15 people all having a conversation about all these different things they do with the technology that we all had. And I was like, okay, this is powerful stuff. We're in the right place. And whatever brought that group of people together must have been special. So Noraxon, again, has changed my life, and it has changed the way we practice. So, talk about some of the things that we struggled with getting started, though. You know, it was normal to have growing pains. Everybody kept saying that. The hardest thing we had to deal with was figuring out how to make the technology work. There are little glitches, and it just took practice. And I, again, really value the support that Noraxon provides to its user, because their customer service is second to none. They take care of their users. But what we do is all about looking for efficiencies and inefficiencies and trying to improve upon them. And so when you're not efficient with the way you use the equipment, it sends a bad message to patients sometimes. So again, I'm going to emphasize that you just need to practice, and sensors will still fall off sometimes. But the key is, please, please, please act like you've been there, put them back on, and keep going, because it's just one of those things that you need to kind of work through. So we quickly realized that we needed to not start with everything. We went on and put every sensor we had on every patient, and before we knew it, we were flooded with information that we didn't necessarily know what to do with. And so we then started trying to prioritize our methodology. You know, when you have a lot of sensors, there's a lot more opportunities for one piece to fail when you're actually looking for data from another piece. So pick what you find the most value in and use it. And then we found that to be kinematics. And granted, our system, we don't have the fancy treadmill, we don't have the pressure plates, but with kinematics, we can tell a patient a lot very quickly. And then that actually helps us guide us how to use the other equipment, the EMG, or you know, if we ever end up adding pressure plates or a treadmill, it really helps guide the process of how we move forward. So creating value through simplicity, that was the title of my talk today. Patients really don't have any idea what we're talking about. You know, and Corey mentioned this in the last presentation, that, you know, you show them all these charts and numbers, and they don't know what to do with it. You are the bridge that kind of brings that together. So too much information can be counterproductive, as I'm sure many of you have seen. it can even be counterproductive for you. I have found myself looking through charts trying to talk myself out of a situation that I got myself into, and that's not always productive either. So I think what makes us special as providers is our ability to break that data down and use it in actionable ways and provide information that's actually valuable to patients. So every patient wants to know, what's wrong with me? What do I need to do to fix it? And how long is it going to take? Though this technology doesn't necessarily answer all of those questions, it does help to give them some parameters of, okay, there are some serious issues here that you can't see with the naked eye, or there are some serious issues that maybe you didn't even know were there. And so working through that is a process, and if you can show them that progress as they're going, it helps communicate those items. We really value symmetry. We spent we don't just see runners, unfortunately. We see a lot of athletes, and I'm talking primarily about gait analysis, but in gait, your body is designed to be symmetrical sagittally. So your internal organs are different, but your right and your left hand are pretty similar in most cases. When you lose motion out of that sagittal plane and into the coronal and transverse planes, that leads to increased load and increased wear and tear that can be detrimental to your body. So that leads me to our report of findings, how we communicate this stuff with patients. So our running report, running assessment can take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. And our biggest struggle early on was actually with the report of findings. We would have this great assessment, get all this information, and then we're trying to weed through it and give a patient something useful, and we weren't always able to do it quickly, led us to having extra appointments or just struggles there. So this, you're probably all familiar with this report on the left side. It's the Noraxon running report, and it shows stance phase, swing phase, the different phases of gait, cadence, etc. We use cadence a lot, and we definitely look at the percent differences in the phases. We also look at the standard deviation a lot as an indication of some instability. Over here is a report that we have created ourselves on the right side here. And this report was a 1.5 year long project that we undertook trying to improve our efficiency in doing gait analysis. And so what this report does for us is it simply breaks down right and left symmetry of this person from the data that we extract from this running report. We do not discount the graphs that are on the other pages of this running report because they're very important, but we use this report on the right that we've created to point our treatment and our diagnosis a lot of times, because it gives us a prioritized explanation of asymmetries. And I'll get more into this in a few minutes, but basically this lower right-hand corner is simply a prioritized order of these joints. And then the pie chart to the left shows ankle plantar flexion is 18%. That's 18% of all of these numbers. So basically the cumulative difference, ankle plantar flexion accounted for 18%, 18.5% of that. This one is just a different way to show the same data. It shows you ankle plantar flexion and hip adduction are the two largest discrepancies while this person was running. And I believe this recording was about a minute of running. And then this chart directly above the table of numbers is a percent difference side to side on the right side of the screen. And that shows you which of the ranges of motion in that gait site or in that minute of running were the most asymmetrical from a percentage standpoint. So where knee flexion accounts for 90 degrees of range of motion, or 86 degrees of range of motion, knee flexion, the extension is actually a bigger percentage difference. So 5 degrees out of 90 is not a big deal, but 5 degrees out of 10 is a huge deal. So I guess that brings me to my next point of why is diagnostic imaging valuable? we're looking at this X-ray on the left side of the screen, and you see, hopefully most of you can see that there's a fracture to the fibula, tibia, and some dislocation of the joint. And what the point that I'm trying to make here is that we understand that because we've seen this before. This is an extreme example, and I'm not trying to discount the training of radiologists, because it takes a lot to see some of these, what's going on in some of these images. But as a group of providers, they are all on the same page in many cases about what this means. So the most important aspect of diagnostic imaging is the inter-examiner reliability. And 2 or more people look at the same test and come to the same conclusion. That is a extremely important statement, and it's one that I think is lacking in most data analysis, because I've talked to so many different people from so many different using this technology, using different technology, that they all have different ideas of what normal is, or what right is, or what we should be looking for. And I know every presenter says, well, there needs to be more research, blah, 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 but it is important that we find some common language that can be studied. So, so this is just an example that we put together. It's one of our patients, and he gave us permission to show this. And I just want you all to take a look at this video. I hope you can see it, and just kind of assess in your mind what you see is wrong with their gait. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy, just come up with something in your head. Give you about 5 more seconds. Okay, this is just Noraxon tool being utilized a little bit. So we put some joint tracers on to this person's ankles and knees and hips. And now, and this is from the side, the green is the right side and the red is the left side. Extrapolate what you think might be wrong now and ask yourself, is it the same or is it different than it was before I saw these markers? Okay, so then this report right here, this is the first page of the Noraxon running report, and then on the right here is the first page of our, or the only page of our report. You look at the Noraxon report and you see stance phase of gait is pretty equal. There's quite a bit of standard deviation. Swing phase, pretty equal, quite a bit of standard deviation. Initial swing, a little bit off, and yeah, 74%. That's substantial. Mid swing, back to kind of neutral with a lot of standard deviation, and then terminal swing is pretty substantial difference. So to the trained eye, somebody might be able to see this and say, okay, that's going to lead me to some specific tasks that need to be done. But as somebody who's just starting out, that doesn't necessarily help. So, or it doesn't necessarily guide you specifically. It does help, I'm sorry, Noraxon, but it definitely helps. It just doesn't, it's not specific. So here we look at this other report, and you can immediately see, okay, knee flexion is at the top of this list. There's a 17-degree difference in his knee flexion, accounting for 25% of the total differences. And that's in range of motion, and I understand that that isn't necessarily clean, because 17 degrees of knee flexion is a lot different than 17 degrees of abduction, hip abduction, but it does give you a pointer to show where there's a major difference. We then look at the percentage differences, and knee flexion is about 10%, so that's dumbs it down a little bit, but then your hip adduction and abduction are both like a 70% difference. So it starts raising some questions about and why that's significant. The knee flexion is 25%, but then if you look, the next 3 are also hip abduction, hip adduction, and hip external rotation account for another 40% of the difference in this pie chart. So all I'm saying is that something like this is a simple communication tool that allows us to see similar numbers and then make it reproducible. So then this is the same patient after we evaluated him, used the reports to kind of guide what we were going to look at. So we looked at his knee. Knee was fine, didn't show anything that really jumped out at us from a structural standpoint. Then we evaluated muscles, and we had him do some just gentle push-pull, and when he pulled with his hamstrings beyond 90 degrees, his right hamstring went into a spasm. And so we said, okay, well, we're going to test this. So we took a band, put it around his right ankle, and had him do just some activation of the hamstring. He was able to do that fine. And this is the report about 20 minutes later after we did that. The standard deviation went way down, and the differences in initial swing and terminal swing also decreased substantially. The next thing that we thought was significant is that this number of 17-degree difference in his knee flexion immediately dropped by a substantial amount. So this is not, I don't know if this is the right way to approach this. I don't know if it's, you know, I know there's a lot of studies out there on symmetry and comparing people to normative values for running, but this was the best way that we could get reproducible information that patients understood. So all I'm saying is that this is how we explain things to patients, and I hope hopefully it maybe triggers something for you to think about. But the pie chart evened out a little bit more as we went, as you can see, and the differences, all of these percent differences side to side improved. So it then guided our care, and unfortunately, COVID-19 stopped this patient from coming back in afterwards, but he reports none of his symptoms that he was having, which was right hip pain. So just to give you a little bit of a quick tutorial on how we did this, we like numbers, so we extract the numbers directly from the Noraxon report and put them into a spreadsheet. And then we just started playing around to see what values gave us. We came up with all kinds of different scoring, all kinds of different stuff that we didn't find a whole lot of value in. And we ultimately reverted back to just taking the numbers, moving them over, and then prioritizing them. And it makes it so simple for us to communicate with patients and use gait not only for like a runner, but for any athlete that might be having some dysfunction or pain. We found that we can give them some very valuable information very quickly that can be directly correlated to some actionable items. So the other thing that we've done is that video that I showed you guys, the video without the tracers and the video with the tracers, I've shown that to probably 100 different healthcare providers, and I interviewed a bunch of physical therapists for our job here, and we interviewed, I think, 12 people, and only one person said it close right, and pretty much nobody else ever gives us an actionable item as their first look. And so all I'm saying is this is the vernacular on the screen that you're looking at that people use to communicate about what's wrong with people's gait. And I can't stand it. It's so nondescript and non-medical that we need to be better as a group. And we have the tools in our offices to do that. And so getting up on my soapbox a little bit here, but I just like Corey, am talking about improving collaboration and improving the way we communicate with each other. So we as an office take this information that we glean from the reports and try to figure out what the primary dysfunction while they're running is. So what is gleaming the most, or what's going to glean us the most value in correcting. In that particular case, the hamstring activation after the exam was an immediate find, so we started activating it. We saw improvement. He would also need to strengthen his adductor on the it was on the right side, I believe. I have to look back, but whichever side had more instability or more range of motion in the adduction in the hip. So basically, if a person can walk, we recommend they get evaluated. If a person can run, we recommend they get evaluated. And they don't have to be a runner to derive value from gait analysis. And that's an important thing. A lot of people get pigeonholed into this running only. We put pretty much every athlete we can find on this and tell them, okay, you can garner benefit by strengthening or mobilizing or whatever. So The reason gait, in my opinion, is so important is because it gives us a picture of tissue under stress and how it responds to that stress. And by doing it this way, by using Noraxon, we can get a numerical profile of what's going on at that moment in time. And that's really important because you can do it as a baseline. You can do it as a post-treatment evaluation, but you have to be able to do it efficiently. It's something that you can do in your practice on a day-to-day basis. Oh geez, unable to play video. Well, that's not good. So I'm going to just talk to you about this gentleman for a second. He's a college baseball player, and he came to us. He had Tommy John surgery on his throwing arm a few years ago, and during rehab was developing a great deal of back pain. So we started working with him, and we did a gait analysis on him. And we said to him, okay, so your hip internal rotation when you're running seems to be the biggest issue, and I just want to figure out why. And he said, you've got to be kidding me. And this video was supposed to demonstrate, he did this demonstration for us and showed us how little internal rotation he had in his right hip. And so that to me was an immediate, like, okay, we're on to something. And so we then looked at it, and it turned out that he was not actually without range of motion in the hip. He was unable to activate the internal rotators of his hip. So we started a strengthening regimen, and he improved drastically. So I guess bringing back to all of this, why is this so important? Anyone who's done a gait analysis should know that you can pretty much see weakness in a hip or an ankle in almost every patient. So when there's a ton of studies out there about hip OA, knee OA, non-contact injuries and back pain, relating to weakness that's found after those injuries are occurring, my statement here is we should be strengthening and finding these problems earlier in athletes and doing something about it. It's in gait analysis, we put the tissue under stress and can see how it responds very easily and very quickly for an athlete. And so that athlete might be asymptomatic. They might not even have a problem, but if they have hip weakness, who's to say that the research from the osteoarthritis down the road doesn't correlate with weakness then? You're not going to hurt a person by having them do some strengthening or do some stabilization stuff for those hips. So the other comment is that video observational gait analysis is not super reliable, but there are a lot of studies about these things because they can be reproduced. So with the osteoarthritis, with the in the knees and the hips, contralateral pelvic drop, weakness in the gluteus medius, it all adds up to we can find this stuff early, and we've all seen it on asymptomatic patients. So why is this important in my opinion? Because you can't do an MRI at 10 miles an hour. You can't do an MRI at mile 3 or mile 10. And how many patients say, my knee starts hurting at mile 3? You can't see how a tissue responds to the load with traditional imaging. And I think the problem and the reason that this hasn't become what it should be at this point is that motion analysis can be reproducible if we work together and communicate to improve our intra-examiner reliability and consistency. And just like Corey was saying earlier, collaboration to improve this is needed. More research is needed, but we need to find ways to speak the same language. This should be able to be very much equivalent to this, and we are lucky enough to have these resources in our practices and in our clinics that we use on patients every day. So I encourage all of you to open up these doors of collaboration and improve the inter-examiner reliability of what you do. And so if we know weakness is correlated with a stress response, such as osteoarthritis, elsewhere in the body, then we can hypothesize that identifying such dysfunctions early and intervening would lead to reduced tissue load and therefore reduced prevalence of the wear and tear. This hypothesis is only as good as the ability to test it. And that's what we need to improve upon, in my opinion. And I think by doing this, by coming together and talking about how we do things, like I've done here today, we will be able to improve our ability to evaluate what we do. So my call to action here, and I'm again up on a soapbox, but I do not think that I am right. I do not necessarily think that our way of looking at it is the only way and is the way that this should be researched. But I do think that we have the tools to come together and develop those methods that can be studied and then make them measurable and then study them as a group or coordinate the way we do it. This website, mahc.me/collaborate, we as an office have decided that anyone here today that would like to collaborate and talk about ways to improve the inter-examiner reliability, we will share this spreadsheet with you so you can use it in your own clinic at no cost, no charge or anything like that. So the idea is that we open up the lines of communication and start talking about how we can work together better. So I guess that's pretty much it. I think everyone can benefit from what we do, but I think the way we present the data and how we communicate with each other is very important. So Zach, that's all she wrote.